Greetings fellow Guitar-Lalians, Jeff Weinberger coming at you here with a new tutorial. We're going to continue our discussion of tritones. This time we're getting into tritone substitutions. And just to define from previous videos what a tritone is, it is an interval from one note to another note, the space between two notes, and the measurement of that interval is 3 whole steps. So when you go, for instance, from the note C to the note G flat, that's 3 whole steps. C to D is 1 whole step, D to E is another whole step, and E to G flat, or F sharp if you want to call it that, is another whole step. So it's 3 whole steps between two notes. That's a tritone. It divides the octave in half, an octave being 12 half steps. And basically we were discussing these in the previous videos about how to use them in a blues context or a rock blues context. Instead of big bar chords or cowboy chords, we're talking about little 2-note intervals that can be a nice substitute for bigger chords and take up a little less space and mix very nicely with other chords. And so today we're going to talk about how to take those intervals and use them to substitute some chords for other chords. And you hear this a lot in jazz. What I was doing just then in the intro was a jazz turnaround, very typical, not totally adventurous jazz turnaround, a pretty standard one. I was taking a turnaround that could have been really boring. It could have just been E minor to A, D minor to G, and then back to C. Which maybe that there would be a time and a place for that. That could be a fairly interesting chord progression. But if you're trying to do something that sounds kind of modern and has a little bit of an edge to it, that isn't going to cut it. That might fit nice into something really mellow or something kind of retro or something, but if you are trying to get kind of a modern sound or a jazz sound, you're going to want to spiff those chords up a little bit. So what we're doing here, a turnaround is basically at the end of a tune. It's that section of the tune, usually the last 4 bars, that bring you back to the beginning of the tune. And sometimes the turnaround can also be used as an ending. It might lead to that final chord. So in this case, E minor to A, D minor to G, C. That's our turnaround. If we did those as cowboy chords. It would end up sounding like some 70s soft rock or something like that. Do them as 7th chords, spiff those up a little further and make them into 7th chords. You get E minor 7. A7, D minor 7, G7, and then maybe like C major 7. Okay, so that's a little jazzier. It's still not quite what we're looking for. That'd be okay. Not bad, but still, it lacks a little bit of sophistication, it lacks a little bit of depth, and it doesn't quite say everything we need it to say. So what we would do is we would pull out those dominant 7th chords, the A7 chord, which is a nice chord by itself, but it shares a tritone with another chord, and we'll talk about that in a minute, E flat 7. And then the G7 chord is a nice enough chord and everything, but it's pretty plain sounding. And if we wanted something cooler, we would swap that out for a chord that shares its same tritone, and that would be D flat 7. So already I might have lost some of you. Again, the tritone is that interval contained in the chord that has 2 notes 3 whole steps apart. And so certain chords share these tritones, and you can swap them out for each other. It's known as tritone substitution. The simplest example I can give you is the chord G7. The chord G7 has the note F and the chord B in it. F is its flatted 7th, and B is its 3rd. So that's all well and good. G7, great chord, but the chord D flat 7 has those same 2 notes, the F and the B in them. In this case, it's the flatted 7th and 3rd of a D flat 7. we actually changed the spelling of that B note. We're going to be calling it C flat, but that's neither here nor there. I'm not even going to get into that, but just know that that note that you would normally call B, that's part of this D flat 7 chord. It's the flatted 7th. So what you end up getting is a much hipper sound. Instead of D minor to G7 to C, we're going to do D minor to D flat 7 to C. Let's see what that sounds like. That's kind of approaching jazzy. That definitely sounds like that sort of mid-century 50s style jazz. Not the super hip modern stuff like John Scofield, Pat Metheny, Bill Frisell. Not way out there kind of stuff, but it's definitely approaching what we hear as jazz. And so we took a G7 chord, which by itself might have been a little simple sounding, and we made it D flat 7, which is a lot hipper sounding. Now you can do that to any 7th chord. So in the case of E minor to A, that's an okay chord progression, E minor to A. Instead of that, how about E minor to E flat? Let's try that. Yeah, that's it. That's that sound we're looking for, the tritone substitution.